So just to refresh your memory, it's been a few weeks. We've been solving quadratic equations. How can you tell if an equation is quadratic? What does it have in it that makes it quadratic? That's a square root. Okay. And we talked about two different ways to solve it. To solve these quadratic equations, one is to take the positive and negative square root, and the other is to factor. What happens if you can't do neither? Well, there's one more thing that works all the time. And that's something called the quadratic formula. Now, at the end of this lesson in your package, there's a proof of the quadratic formula, but we're not gonna go through the proof. But basically, we just do some algebra to manipulate the equation to figure out how we find x. And to find x, using the quadratic equation, it is going to be this formula. Given the quadratic equation in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, we take the negative of b, we add and subtract the square root of b again squared minus 4 times whatever a is times whatever c is. And we're going to take that whole thing and we're going to divide it by 2 times whatever the value of a is. Yes, perhaps it looks a little bit complex, but you guys will be surprised at how quickly you will remember this. That being said, you will always be given the formula. Okay? Because I'm more concerned, do you know how to use it rather than do you know how to memorize it? Okay? But you guys will pick this up pretty quick. So just looking at some examples, if we look at this one. Well, first of all, it's got an x squared and an x term, so we're not going to do the plus minus square root. You will find if you try to factor this, it's not going to work. Okay, you can't. You may think, oh, what about minus 7 and plus 1? Well, minus 7 plus 1 is negative 6, but minus 7 times 1 is not plus 7. Not going to be able to do it. So we've got to use the quadratic formula. I'm just going to rewrite it. And you don't have to do this, but I'm just going to remind myself what the values of A, B, and C are in this equation. What's the value of A? 1. How about B? Negative 6. And C? 7. So all I'm going to do is plug it in and simplify it as much as I can to get my answer. Answers, actually, because there's two answers here. There's this plus this, divide this, and there's this minus this, divide this. We just don't want to write it twice, so that's why we do the plus minus. So remember, negative b, b is negative 6, so it's going to be negative negative 6. Plus or minus the square root of, and we need parentheses here because it's negative, negative 6 all squared minus 4 times the value of a, which is 1, times the value of b, or c, which is 7. Divided by 2 times the value of a, which is 1. And then we just simplify this as much as we can. Well, negative negative 6 becomes plus 6. What about negative 6 all squared? 36 minus 4 times 1 times 7. 4 times 1 times 7. 28. Divided by 2. I can keep going because I can simplify inside the square root. So I get 6 plus or minus square root of 8 divided by 2. The question is, can I keep going? You actually can, because what can you do with the root 8? Doesn't that simplify? Doesn't this become root 4 times root 2? Which means it becomes 2 root 2. Divide 2. Can I keep going? Yeah, I can divide everything by 2. 6 divided 2 is 3. Remember, all the non-square roots divide 2. You don't divide the square roots by 2. And I get 3 plus or minus 1 square root 2, or just square root 2, over 1, but I don't have to write over 1. Just remember, you've written 2 answers here. There are 2 answers. One of the answers is 3 plus the square root of 2, and the second answer is 3 minus the square root of 2. Both of those will work. Let's look at the second. We've got the formula here. So x is equal to negative b. What's b? 1. Plus or minus the square root of b, which is positive 1. I don't need parentheses if it's positive. But you can put them. It's still right. Minus 4 times a, which is? Sorry? 3. Times c, which is? Negative 2. Divide, remember the whole thing, divided by 2 times 3. So I have negative 1 plus or minus. What's 1 squared? And what's minus 4 times 3 times minus 2? Plus 24. Divided by 6. That gives me negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 25 divided by 6. Can I keep going? What can I do with the square root of 25? It's just 5, isn't it? I don't have to break it down. It's just 5. So these answers are actually not going to have square roots in them. So my answers are going to be negative 1 plus 5 divide 6 and negative 1 minus 5 divide 6. And what's negative 1 plus 5? Divide 6. Well, that reduces to 2 over 3. That's an answer. And negative 1 subtract 5. Negative 6 divided 6, which works out to exactly negative 1. If this happens, like if you can actually take the square root of this number, that means you could have factored it. Okay. This one you couldn't have factored because you got square root in your answer. But sometimes some students find it easier actually to do the quadratic formula than spend a whole bunch of time trying to figure out the factor. It's up to you. This next one. What's wrong with this next one to start? Yeah, remember, we gotta have 0 on one side, so I gotta move this over by adding 7. So I'm gonna get x squared minus 5x plus 7 equals 0. Now I want you guys to try plugging in and simplifying using the quadratic formula. And if you do it correctly, you should find that something weird's going to happen. So yeah, remember, you'll always be given the quadratic. Hopefully you've all got a first step that looks something like this. Some of you may have just gone to this right away and say, well, I know that's not. That's dumb. You don't have to do it exactly like this. If you want to take a little shortcut here and there and you understand it, that's okay. So this is going to become 5. This is going to become positive 25. Subtract 28. Divide 2. Which if I go a little bit further, it's going to give me the square root of negative 3 by 2. Hopefully you're there. Now what? What's weird? Yeah, the square root of negative 3 because you can't do it. Which means you can't simplify. Which means there are no solutions. If you get a negative under the square root, you stop. Because there is not an answer. Because you just can't go any further. Okay. This one, hopefully you recognize to start. We got to move the 7x over by subtracting 7x. So we'll get 4x squared, then put the minus 7x in, then put the minus 1 at the end to have it in proper order. Then we're going to have negative 7 plus or minus the square root of negative 7 in parentheses minus 4 times 4 times negative 1 divided by 2 times 4. Keep working ahead of me if you can. Negative 7 becomes plus. Negative 7 squared becomes positive 49. Negative 4 times 4, or minus 4 times 4 times negative 1 gives us plus 16. By 8 gives us 7 plus or minus the square root of 65. Plus 2. That's it. Divide 8. Can I go any further? Can I do anything with the square root of 65? Can I take it exactly, or is there a perfect square that I can reduce it with or simplify it? There's not going to be one. I mean, the only one, like, it wouldn't be an even number perfect square because this is odd. So really, I mean, I guess maybe you could think about 9 or think about 25, and neither of those work. So we're done. And you don't have to split it up into the two answers. You can leave it like this, but I want you just to remember there's two answers here. Okay? 7 plus the square root of 65 divide 8, 7 minus the square root of 65 divide 8. And notice we're actually not using our calculator and going to decimal because we want exact answers. The only time we start using our calculator is if it's a problem-solving situation. Okay. All right. Let's finish with this one because I have something else for you before you leave. Okay, this is weird. Why is it weird?
Fraction.
Yeah, it's got a fraction. Well, I guess you could plug it in, but that's going to get a little nasty, isn't it? When you plug it in, like you're going to get 3 plus or minus this squared, which is 9, minus 4 times 1 over 4 times 9, which is a fraction, and it's got a square root over top, and that's crazy. So I want to make life easier. Can you think of anything that you could do to change this equation so that there's no fractions? Remember, if you can do whatever you want to one side of the equation, as long as you do the same thing to the other. What can we do? Multiply both sides by 4. Because the nice thing is, on the right side, 4 times 0 is still 0. So it's still set up nicely. But 4 times 1 over 4 now just becomes x squared. 4 times negative 3x becomes minus 12x, and 4 times 9 becomes plus 36. This one, I'd like you to go from here. X equals negative 12, so I'm just going to make it 12. Plus or minus negative 12 squared minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is 36, divided by 2 times 1. That's going to be 12 plus or minus the square root of 144 minus 144. Well, this is just going to become 0, isn't it? So the plus minus doesn't matter here. All I'm left with is 12 divided 2. And you'll find if you factor this, you would get x minus 6 times x minus 6 is equal to 0. Therefore, your only solution is x equals 6. That has to be the same as if you use the quadratic formula. Okay? Okay, we're going to stop there for now.